Hello and welcome to our art stream where we will be painting dungeon tiles. These are some finished dungeon tiles that we painted last time. This is a doorway. You can see there's a working door here. This piece is all done, ready, and set. What we're going to be doing is getting pieces to that stage where they are also ready to go, ready to play with. I'm going to be taking, these are the pieces that we've painted or printed on the 3D printers behind us. They have been primed and they're ready for a base coat. I have a big bin left to do of that. We got our paints in, so I have all the gray that I need for that. What my dad here is going to be doing, these are pieces that have that base gray coat in, is he's going to be taking a dark gray and putting in a few varied bricks in random spots, like this one. To get them ready for finishing like this. Just to build a little random variation in each tile set. These are all 3D printed by us, assembled, painted, everything like that. They are nice magnetized dungeon pieces, so they hold together just by sitting next to each other. And we use these in our D&D Twitch stream play that we stream here on this channel, Dice and Dungeons on Twitch. And we do that on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern. So if you feel like seeing some of these tiles that we make on show in action, you can check us out there. We also have a YouTube channel. If you're interested in the designs for these prints, you can go to our website, diceanddungeons.com, and there is an attributions page that has all of the 3D model designers that make these amazing pieces that we print and paint here on the show.
This is
all of our
half the neutral gray that exists in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yes, we had a whole bunch of the gray for these base coats. I burned through a lot. This is a very large set. So, and I'm gonna be doing that pretty much the whole day. There's just a lot of tiles to work through. But you can actually sort of see, we have the pieces here. The different parts of a dungeon set. So, just because they fit together nicely. This is the printed and primed piece. So it starts off as a spool. We go through and print on these 3D printers back here, just over behind Dad here. Those 3D printers then, create a bunch of individual pieces that we glue together on a little raft on the bottom here, a little base that we've magnetized. Once it's all glued together, we spray it down with airbrushed on some primer. And once that is airbrushed and dried, then we go to this step, which is what I'm going to be doing today, putting on the gray base coat. Now this could be, if you wanted to make it sandstone, you could go with a light brown. If you wanted it to be some sort of magical stone, you could do any color you wanted, really. There's a whole lot of options. And once that gray base coat's on, then you do detail work. In this case, we are putting in some random dark gray bricks on the walls. So, as you can see, I've sort of randomly distributed them, so when the pieces are all together, and this will create just a subtle variation in a piece. And then, of course, the last step is to make it look all worn and ready for a nice D&D adventure. This is primarily done using a wash. In this case, we've used a black wash, and I've tried to disperse it to give this sort of dark, used look. So that's the steps of everything that we've been doing with this dungeon tile. I'll give you your piece back. You're gonna be just digging away, putting in those dark spots, and maybe we can have you move over a little so you're more visible on camera.
Get on camera, that's pretty exciting.
I'm gonna be down here in the corner, just applying a whole lot of neutral gray paint that we just got. I went through almost all of it. Oh, no, I went through literally all of the gray paint that we had.
Yeah, like two and a half of those little jars.
I'd say I did about half to a third to a half of the dungeon tiles that we printed for this large dungeon set. And now that we've resupplied, I'm going to be getting through the rest of them. Since these pieces are finished, I'm moving them out of the way to make space and to make sure I don't mess up and get paint on them. Alright. So, here we go. Give it a nice shake. It's been in the mail, so I don't know. Settled. Our new paint here is, but always good to get it mixed up properly. I'm gonna be doing I've pretty much gotten through all the weird shaped pieces, things like windows, doors, corners, things like that. And I'm just down to these simple floors and walls. And the easiest one, just floors. So these would be in the center of a room, for example. And they have a little tile sort of going on there. So I'm going to be trying to get through as many of these as possible. Since they're down to these fairly simple shapes, hopefully I can go fairly quickly. So I'm shaking this up. I'm just getting out from the big bin. We have, this is our bin O dungeon tiles. I'm gonna just be grabbing all of these, getting them set over in an area where I can access them easily. A nice, I think a good thing to do when you're doing a lot of painting is to just have your everything set up so it is conducive to what you're working on. In this case, getting ready, sort of getting myself a little bit of a one person conveyor belt of parts.
And I'm just painting blocks one at a time with a dark gray color.
But you can always talk about what you're doing or technique for how you're doing it.
I'm using a brush and putting the paint on where I want it.
You can be a little more specific.
No,
Right.
okay. I'm trying to pick sort of random but yet aesthetically pleasing locations for the darker colored.
Now,
Sometimes just one block here or there. Sometimes they look good when they're like in a cluster.
yeah, so a piece might, they might have just had a couple darker blocks that they placed in a row or in a little cluster because they came that way. It's just the order where they were put in. So let's start off a brand new neutral gray bottle here. Got a nice shake. Since I'm covering such a large amount of area, I'm using this nice large brush. And because it's all one color, I don't have to worry about anything other than just getting it on. I don't have to deal with trying to create a nice division between two areas, for example. And because I'm going to be working fairly quickly in order to get this all covered, I'm wearing a glove because I'm going to be handling sections that aren't fully dry necessarily, and it just helps protect my hand and me
being covered in gray.
From being covered in gray. We're using this is a water-based acrylic paint, so it's not particularly dangerous, but you don't necessarily want to put it in your mouth or eye. Any sort of area where it can seep into your bloodstream. It's just not something that if you can avoid doing.
Yeah, if you can avoid painting your eye, that's always
exactly. So that is why I'm wearing the glove, because
you don't want it in your eye.
I don't want it anywhere on me, really, in general.
You could get it on your hand and then rub your eye, and then you get.
If you're doing a lot of miniature painting, though, wearing gloves can be a good thing to do for, especially if you're doing some more detailed pieces and you're moving them around, holding them a lot. Just getting a box of basic, simple gloves can be great, because not only does it protect your skin and yourself from the paint, it also protects the paint from the body oils on you.
Because an oily model might not stick very well.
Not only that, but your hand will start rubbing the paint, and sometimes it can pull some paint off. Just by handling, you can discolor it, sort of rub two types of paint into each other accidentally. There's other ways around this. There's also what are called painting handles. Here's an example. And this lets you hold a model and rotate it without touching the model. But it's almost always a good idea to wear gloves when dropping paint brushes.
You get it on you?
A little on me. So, that's the danger of painting when you've been drinking a lot of coffee.
Or when there's gravity around. Gravity will do that too.
Alright, so this is all I'm going for. Just a nice, simple gray coat. And I just have a whole lot of them to do.
Yep. And this is what I'm doing. You can see the color variation there. So I'm just doing each one more or less differently than the others, but I'm not paying attention, so they might be the same.
Now, we're going with a fairly simple, basic gray, because since we're using this for a show, and we're not sure what sort of situation our characters are going to find ourselves in, we tried to keep it fairly generic in design. So this could be a castle, it could be a ruin, it could be a, just a stone building like a church or temple, anything like that, a prison. Hopefully we don't go to jail, but you never know in D&D. But that's why we're doing this in gray rather than a more. You can always do like more interesting variations and colors. Like maybe it's for like a wizard tower and you want it like a blue stone or something cool like that. And to do stuff like that, you just put in your base coat, and you can follow everything that we're doing here, but just use a different paint color to create all sorts of things. Because this would be very different in gray than it is in, say, like a sandstone sort of yellowy brown or
red granite.
Or a dark red granite.
Yep. We did some on a dark red granite. They came out pretty well.
Yeah, we have our dungeon tile, like the old worn dungeon tiles, are done in a dark red. And that's because in the world we're playing in, a lot of the official dwarven constructions are done in red granite canonically, and we were going through dwarven ruins. So, as such, we had to make our dungeon tiles match the theme. And they look pretty good. They're very menacing. I think.
Mm-hmm. I got one. You want to see one?
If you feel like it, but
yeah, after I'm done with this.
You don't like anything to keep to stop painting the same gray color.
I thought maybe people would like to see what it looks like.
I know.
Those were actually the first things we ever did.
We also did a set like this, which is like this plaster walled wood. Which is pretty nice. It's sort of that plaster and lumber medieval town look. Great for any sort of interior in a city in almost any fantasy setting. Very good for that generic look. So, what I'm trying to do is walk a thin line between full coverage and not using too much paint. Like, you want to hit that sweet spot between just enough paint. So, because especially with a volume like this, you're gonna be burning through a lot of paint, and I don't want to waste any. So even a little bit of saving here or there will add up over time. In a large set like this. But I'm not... Hi, Frequent Flyer Mom. I'm not actively looking to have them be consistently covered in gray either. As long as they meet the like general base coat requirements, a little inconsistency here or there will actually help their
looking realistic.
Their sort of realistic look, because no stone wall is ever going to be done perfectly. So your models shouldn't either. Alright, so I think I wonder how many of these there are even. I'm really looking forward to getting to the floors, because they're just like the most straightforward of all the pieces.
Oh, you're slapping gray paint on there real quickly.
Well, that's my goal. The floors should be at least twice as fast because they're about half as large. But a lot of times in painting, I like to do the hardest pieces first and then sort of have an easier time going backwards. So that by the end, when I sometimes I'll lose focus and patience and stuff if I'm doing the same thing over and over. So by starting with the hardest parts, I end up having a bit easier time by the end when I don't have to have as much of that focus. So that's why I'm sort of working backwards. From hardest to easiest. Okay. There's 5 in a row.
Ooh, there they are in a row. Mine are not in the row. Mine are just scattered around.
Yeah, you don't like to organize your pieces. I like to organize them so I know which ones are gonna be the driest one first.
Oh.
You know, so I'm not accidentally picking up a wet piece.
Mm-hmm.
That's my main reason for organizing pieces, especially if I'm doing like multiple things to them in one sitting.
I'm just mainly trying to get them out of the way.
Oh, you want to do, someone to do a flip? Let's see. Okay. I think that flipped. There. I did a flip. One thing that I always have to try and remember is getting the little edges here. While they're mostly hidden when it's all together, you want to just make sure that it actually is colored in case there's a little bit that you can see, and sometimes it just sort of subtly carries through. But it's easy part to forget to do.
The bases?
The edges.
Oh, the edges of the
floor. That's why I always try and give myself a second after I'm done painting to just do a quick rotation, look around, make sure there's nothing glaringly obvious. You can always go back and fix anything. That's not too particularly hard to do, but if you can get it in the first time,
then you don't have to do it.
Then you never have to try and do it a second time. Okay. Going along the edge. Well, I am thinking of it. Yeah. well, it's not a very, this large brush I'm using, well, it's not particularly great for detail work. When you're doing something like this, it's very nice, actually. It holds a lot of paint in it, and applies it quite quickly. So, letting me get through this large number of dungeon tiles pretty well.
Yeah, pretty quickly. Yeah, it's taking me almost as long, maybe even longer, to do these little bits than.
Well, you're having to be a little more careful with your application of those dark gray squares.
Yeah, a little more. Although if you get it on the one next to it, then you just decide that the one next to it is going to be dark.
Exactly. Since it's just a random application, you don't have to be too terribly careful. As long as you're not creating a huge mess. But it does take a bit more focus than just mass applying spray paint for a base coat. But these should be a very nice set to play in once we get it all done. Having this very large, very variable dungeon set for D&D will be a really good thing to have. Part of the reason I like to use a black primer is if I'm doing something like this, if there's an area that's slightly thinner in the paint, I can actually use that to my advantage because it just makes it a slightly darker gray, and it sort of builds in that variation that we'll be getting with the wash and with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That slight variation, that subtle variation, just gets further enhanced that way. So it's just one of those nice things where if you were using like a gray primer would be fine. It would help me have that, especially if I was looking to have it be very consistently gray, because it would hide that. And there are other primer colors. Black and gray are pretty common, but that undercoat that happens as a result of the primer is actually something worth considering when you're doing any sort of painting. I also feel like having a black primer just adds there's a little more saturation and richness to the colors. It's pretty subtle, but it has that solid underbase, that dark black underbase.
Yeah, all paints are, unless you put many coats on, slightly transparent. So you could tell if there's dark or light underneath.
Yeah, exactly. So, while a primer, its main job is just to get your paint to adhere better, it can be a nice subtle part of the overall color design of whatever it is you're painting. Just something to sort of consider if you get into painting sometimes. Okay. on my 10th wall.
Out of 50? Oh, there's a lot of them.
Like 5, 10, 15, 20. It's about 30 more. So I'm maybe about a quarter done, I would guess, on the wall sections. The floors sections, there's also a lot, but those are very simple, so they should go quick. But yeah, it says about 30 more of those, and I've done about one every 3 minutes, after, if you count the intro and everything, that I wasn't painting in. So, you know, I can do about one a minute or something, in half an hour I'll be through all of
Further
it.
along than when you started.
I'm already that.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been doing the short corners and the short hallways.
Oh, I just,
like
and then I picked up a larger piece. We'll see what else is left.
Yeah, those are some of the single wall pieces, it looks like, that I had enough gray paint to do back a while back when I was doing the first batch of base coats. One thing when you're doing something like this, especially with a large volume of paint, to keep an eye out for is if you're going along an edge, sometimes if you have a lot of paint on your brush, it will bleed over. So if I do that, for example, like something like this, it can bleed. Even if I'm painting that side, you can get a little bit on the edges if you're going quickly. In this case, it really doesn't matter because I have to paint all the parts of it. But if you're doing something with a little more variation in color, just something to be conscientious of. You know, keep everything looking normal or fantastical, depending on what you're going for. I wonder which one of these tiles I'm gonna get killed on. Okay.
Put an X on it.
Just be ready for that piece. Yeah. I don't know, I feel like if one of us dies in combat, they should like set aside the tile that they were standing on as like
a memorial.
A memorial. That weird?
Yeah, that would be sad. And we'd have to roll a new character or leave the show.
We would have to roll a new character, I'm guessing.
Come back as a level 1. Again, forever. I think we were level 1 for like 25 sessions or something.
If you count the pre-show, I think we were level 1 for about 35 sessions.
We were convinced that levels were a lie. I think they still are.
We're level 3.
Well, yeah. Okay, so there's a bunch of them with little gray spots. I'll get some more. There's more.
There are plenty of pieces over there for you to put some variation into. Just pick and choose which pieces you'd like to do. You might want to move the pieces you've painted out of the way.
Yep. make room for the new ones. I could do that. Why not? Why not?
What I'm gonna be able to learn from this is how many of these standard dungeon tiles does it take to use one bottle of paint?
Mm-hmm.
That'll be an actually useful statistic, especially if we open an Etsy store.
Yeah. I don't know how much paint to put on.
Because I think these walls are a really good sort of standard dungeon tile. Because they sort of bridge the gap between the floor pieces, which are a little smaller, and the things like the corners or the more complicated pieces that are going to be slightly larger, but less of them. So I think these walls make a really... And there's always a lot of just walls pieces in a dungeon set. So I think this will actually be pretty good, valuable information.
Yeah, you tend to think that, the floors would be the most common ones, but plain floor tiles.
They only happen really when there's like a center of the room away from the walls, because there's in D&D terms, there's 1.5 squares here, which translates to 7.5 feet of space. So if you have 2 of these tiles together like that, you're already looking at a room that is 15 feet wide. So you can actually get away without using the center floor tiles all that much, unless you're in a very large room, like a warehouse or a throne room maybe, or ballroom, pretty much anything.
Pretty much just big rooms.
We had a fight in a ballroom.
We did. We had a fight in a mirrored room in our Halloween special.
Yeah, it was a ballroom that was mirrored for a dance studio.
And if you haven't seen it, you should.
Our Halloween special was a lot of
It
fun.
was really excellent.
That was kind of fun making all those mirrors. Just little cardstock with tinfoil glued on it, and then cut to shape to make little like floor to ceiling mirrors. It's pretty easy and quick, but I think they were kind of fun, and they came out pretty nice.
They came out well. Fortunately, the story had it that the mirrors were warped and cracked. Because getting the tinfoil on absolutely smooth.
Getting tinfoil
really hard.
Tinfoil's temperamental for things like that, but there's some techniques you can use. You can take some like something very hard and flat and sort of rub it along carefully to flatten it out. Things like that. 15. I'm probably going to want to use some alcohol to clean this brush when I'm done, just because of the amount of paint that I've been using with it. I'll do an initial clean with water, but I'm thinking I want to give it a deeper clean afterwards.
Yeah, when you're putting that much paint on,
Yeah.
With a brush that absorbs paint.
Exactly. And it can, the paint can dry on the brush just as easily as it can dry on the model. So after a while, you'll want to periodically clean the brush, and whenever you're done, obviously, give it a thorough cleaning. It'll increase the longevity of your brush, which can save you some money. We've been using the same brushes for way too long.
Way long.
Honestly, way longer than we should. We're very bad about throwing out brushes. It's like
there's still bristles on it.
It's all messed up, but it still holds paint technically. That's something we should be a little better at. We should replacing brushes when they get too old. All right. Definitely
it's a lot of gray.
Have a lot of gray. But this will all pay off when we're all set, and I can kind of go to town on it with the wash. These will look really nice and lived in, thanks to all of this groundwork that we're putting in right now. And I just realized we don't have any music playing in the background. So, with my clean hand that is not gloved, let me get that started. There we go. That's better. It seemed like hearing nothing but furnace seemed a little off. So that's better. This wall seems a little loose. So I'm gonna paint it, but I'm gonna set it aside. I think we'll want to re-glue it, but since I already started painting it, I'll finish doing that. When you're gluing hundreds of pieces together, sometimes there's a piece or two that just doesn't stick quite as well.
Yeah, especially when you're near the end of the epoxy pile and it's starting to set up.
Yeah, so you can see there's a little light wobble in that piece. And rather than have it break while you're playing and having to get a new piece and making it a thing, noticing something like that, and I'll just intentionally break it off once it's dry and we have some epoxy ready to go. But I will wait and create a little pile if I find more, so we can do them all at once. But it's good to note things like that when you find them, just so you're able to get them fixed. There were surprisingly few. There was one other of these walls that didn't adhere fully. Over there.
Yeah, it was. It was just like one out of all of those.
Otherwise, I haven't noticed. So that's the second one, and that one didn't break fully. I can just tell it's loose. It's actually honestly mostly okay, but considering that there are probably somewhere between 1 and 200 pieces that we glued all together here. I mean, like tiles, each one consisting of anywhere between 1 and, I think in some cases, 5 pieces. Not bad that they're holding together. And we've only found like 1.5 loose ones so far, I should say. Pretty happy with that.
Yeah, you did a good job mixing it and spreading it.
Well, you weren't doing most of the mixing.
I don't think for these. Didn't you and Alexis do all these?
Lexi and I did a number of them. I don't know how many. Honestly, we can always go back and see our previous videos, which are getting posted on YouTube.
Yeah, I think that's true. I did a lot of them too before.
Yeah, there was a lot of pieces that we did in chunks of about 25 at a time, I'd say. So it's probably like 4 or 5 gluing sessions. Just putting tiles together. Lexi and I did some, and you and I did some. So, regardless, the glue is done quite well because they all feel quite sturdy. I was actually surprised just from lack of running into it before to find one that was loose there. Just because of how consistent they've been. Okay. Oh, almost up to 20. 3, 6, 9, 10. And there's about 25 left.
Well, I'm finishing up just about the time the show ends.
Possibly, yeah. Doing just the floor and walls.
Yeah.
I still have a huge pile of floor tiles to do. Just floor tiles.
I don't know if I'm going to catch up or not. I think there's a lot of these that are still behind me.
Yes, the nice part is you don't have to paint any of the floors. So that should save you a fair amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Getting more pieces. Another thing you can work on is there's a couple pieces that the airbrush wasn't up and running quite properly when I first started.
Yeah.
There's a couple pieces that aren't really primed properly. So they're the shinier pieces that are sitting back there. Where you just were. Didn't quite get all of
Yeah. I think just brush the primer on.
Yeah. I think. Do we have no spray can primer? Well,
There might. Oh, there's a can there, but I don't know if there's anything in it.
there's only a couple pieces, so it might be pretty. It might be better just to do a quick
Spray can thing.
spray can of them. Airbrush primer is better and more ecologically sound, but it is a lot of setup for like 3 pieces. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There we go. Oh boy. Yep. There's a lot of these.
Yeah, Alexis decided that a gigantic set would be. Well, it gives a lot of flexibility. You can make
Yeah. The more
big
pieces.
scenes, small scenes,
That's
complicated scenes.
That's the big thing, is she tried to design a large set because when you break it down into all the pieces, you just have so many options for different settings, you know, inside corners, outside corners, doorways, hallways, big open areas, little small corridors. There's just, you know, all that variation gives you a lot to play with. And when you're doing a set like this, which can appear in, it could, you know, it can be a castle as much as it could be inside like a windmill or something. It just gives you so much flexibility.
Yep. And even model some of the inside mazes that she likes to put together.
Sometimes, yes. Although we had tried to assemble the set on the dining room table when it was printed and glued but not painted yet, and it was not large enough.
The table wasn't big enough.
The table wasn't big enough to fit the full set.
That's a big table, too.
Yeah. But you could put together an extremely large and impressive dungeon using these pieces. rows and rows and rows of dungeon walls. Now you're doing the little corridor enders.
Mm-hmm.
Those pieces were actually surprisingly annoying to prime. You just had these open air pillars.
Yeah, which don't look like much. They kind of break up the flow of the paint.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's. This will be number 25 of the wall pieces.
Clean this up a little bit here. The brush is starting to get gummy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes it's good to periodically clean your brush. The paint can and will build up on the inside, on the bristles, and start to dry a little bit here and there, and that can create sort of a clump or other problems such as that. And you can avoid that by just taking time to clean your brush periodically. There is 20. I got a little too much paint on my brush there, but that's okay. I can spread it around and use it. Those little short walls, the next batch you're doing?
Looks like it. I think I did some of these already.
Could be.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
Yes.
And here's some more.
So those are walls that only have like a 2.5 foot floor section, as opposed to the ones I'm doing, which have a 7.5 foot floor.
So you can make a very narrow thing.
Mm-hmm.
That way.
Or you can
put a floor in between them.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. I think there's one piece that wasn't printed, wasn't in the design, that we'll probably want, and that's maybe like 6 to 10 inside corners. So an inside corner is just gonna be like a floor tile with a single pillar, kind of like the ones you were painting, but with just one. It's not in camera at all. Still not. There you go. Just one of those.
Just one corners.
That will make an inside corner, so that when two wall sections come up and meet each other, on the inside like this, it would slot in and just create a single pillar in between those 2 points. So that might be something we add in later. Just do a little small run of those. And glue them and prime them. Just to get them as an option. You'd mostly use them for like if you had like an L-shaped room, where you have that corner that's sticking into the room. Things like that. They don't come up a lot, but they come up sometimes when you're mapping out dungeons. And, you know, this isn't nearly as exciting as, say, painting like a monster or a character figure. But this is something that will pay off a lot. Like, if you make a cool manticore, you know, you might only fight a manticore once in a D&D campaign. But the amount of times you're going to pull out and use these in a single campaign will be innumerable. So while it's not super flashy or exciting, it is, if you're gonna really invest a lot of time and energy into making stuff for Dungeons and Dragons, simple things like this, really simple scenery, like crates and barrels, or, you know, benches and chairs and things like that, can fit in a lot of settings, and you can use them a lot. So you're gonna get a lot of mileage for the amount of work. Whereas, other than like a main character figure, you know, you might only use you might only fight one dragon, and it's like not even the right colored dragon that you painted. You know, so those can be really cool and fun, but if you're looking for sort of making a lot, some dungeon pieces or some pieces for D&D or other role-playing games, set pieces like this will give you sort of the most bang for your buck, or value for your time.
You spent a lot of time painting a horse.
Exactly.
This horse.
And horses are
So
fairly usable.
It's a garish horse that probably will never be used because, who's going to, well, I don't know. We run into a couple of people who would ride one person who would have a horse like that.
Who do you think would have a horse like that?
Guillaume.
Oh, yeah. Guillaume. His name is Guillaume. Here's the voice. Is a pop star. He might use a horse like that. You are correct.
Yes, see?
If he deigns to not be carried on like a palanquin or something.
Mm-hmm. I think Nines calls him Guy Human.
Nines has a weird accent. I think he's from the Navinian Empire, which is why he sort of got that French name. He.
Guy Human.
And he almost killed us.
Mm-hmm.
A few times.
It's just a massive fortress of walls.
Yep. I'm gonna need to start moving some in order to have room to do anything. Do I shift them down a bit?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. This was our loose one over here. Our one loose. Oh. Alright. Let's see, it's only a little after 4, so... Yeah, I've done all of this in an hour. Getting all of these painted in. Not bad.
And I've done quite a lot of these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, with us plugging away like this, we're probably gonna get to have a big finished set. Not too distant future here.
Yeah, a lot of black wash. I couldn't get any black wash from the same vendor. I have to buy it from some other place.
Well, we have a fair amount right now of black wash, so we should be okay, but,
and it stretches pretty well.
When we can restock, we'll restock.
Runaway brush.
Runaway brush. I was holding it a little too loosely. I'm trying to walk the line between not gripping the brush and getting a sore hand and not dropping the brush. And ran into the ladder just now. $30. Well, looks like we have about, counting, because there were a couple over there, we have somewhere between 45 and 50 of these walls alone. When you're looking for washes, one that might be interesting is if you can find like a red wash.
Yeah, they do make that.
Might be an interesting one to use sometimes.
Yeah, when I order the black.
So we have green and blue wash in addition to black and umber, which get used way more than anything else in the washes. The black and the umber wash. Umber is just brown, basically. Good for making like wood items, things like that. Just look a little more. Or you can use it to create like a dirt effect, things like that. Depending on what you're going for.
A lot of these prints, the wood
have grains in them.
Yeah, it's pretty decent grains. So it brings out the grain.
The umber wash will seep in to the gaps that make up the grain in the 3D prints, and it'll make them stand out quite a bit. So you'll have these darker grains, whereas the higher points in between the grains stay a little lighter. It's a very nice effect. Get more pieces? Those are a huge pain.
These are a pain.
Because you have to reach in between the walls.
Yeah.
I really did not enjoy painting.
Corridors. Narrow corridors that will no doubt be used to trap us somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Alright. Go. Whew. I can see the end coming with these walls. I'm becoming quite excited to be done painting them.
Are those all the ones that are left to do?
No, there's all the floors still.
Oh, yeah, the floors.
Other than that, yes. Just these walls and the floors only. Parts. Very well, and when I say done, I mean base coat done.
Yeah, and they need to be highlighted like this.
And then they need to be finished.
Washed.
So, almost done with part of step 1.
Yeah, well,
Okay, if you're printing, gluing, priming are step 1 through 3.
mm-hmm.
I'm on step 4. You're
I'm
on
doing
step
step
5.
five.
And then step 6 is the final step. So, doing these is a sort of a 6-step process here. And you can always subdivide those, like putting magnets in, but I just count that as part of gluing. Right. I think this will be 35 of these walls once I get through this. And I've gone through about half to 2/3 of the jar paint to do this.
Yeah, well, I have many bottles of that paint.
Oh, I know. I'm just trying to keep track so I know, like, if we ever decide to sell,
How much paint
we can say, like, it takes, one bottle will do about 50 tiles, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That way we know how much it costs to paint a tile. Roughly. But all told, it takes a lot of work to do all of this, obviously. Time and effort. But from a monetary point of view, these are extremely cheap compared to purchasing pre-made dungeon tiles, especially pre-made and painted dungeon tiles. Which there's a number of people that sell them, some more famous than others, but they're almost always fairly pricey because of the amount of work that goes into producing them. So if you're willing and able to put in that work, you can actually, like, if we were trying to buy all these tiles, we would have had to spend a lot. And you get the added benefit of you can sort of customize your pieces to how you need them. So if, say, for example, you're playing in a setting where everything is orange, I don't know, you can make all of your tiles orange. Which might not be easy to find just out there on the market, because they tend to make things fairly generic to sell to the maximum number of people. But if you wanted like a red dungeon, for example,
buy little orange things.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But like, let's say you have a setting where your dwarves all built buildings in a red granite.
Yep, we use this one. We went through
a bit of
these.
You're gonna need. You might not be able to just find that on the market, so that's one of the other advantages of making it yourself. Plus, it can be kind of fun actually, and relaxing and everything like that. To put aside some time to really just create something, and it's a little fun when you're playing with it to just think like, yes, I made that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially like that warehouse scene.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that one came out really well, I thought, and it was fun to play in it.
Yeah. So it can be a little emotional gratification that comes from making your own pieces to play with. It's just a big screen of bricks there.
Yeah, it must be pretty impressive to see it online.
Hopefully it's not too boring. Just bricks all the time. But this is just a necessary part of getting these dungeon tiles painted, is having a whole lot of one color to have that consistent look throughout. It's kind of funny, when you're making a dungeon set, you have to walk a nice line between uniformity and variation. Because you don't want every piece to look identical. That wouldn't feel realistic. But you also want it to all look like it belongs together. Like it's all part of one structure. So, you accomplish that by, first, step one, having a cohesive design. So, all of these have the same brick structure, for example. And that gives you your sort of first layer of uniformity. And then your second layer of uniformity is having a consistent base coat So the underlying color that goes throughout the whole thing, like if one of these was suddenly red, it wouldn't look like it fit with everything else. But because all of the pieces are the same gray, when I go in, or when both of us go in and put random darker stones in, or um, cover it with a wash in a inconsistent way, it creates that piece-to-piece variation, but doesn't cover the uniformity that you've built in already at the same time. Because usually you don't walk down a hall and every single section of wall is identical to every other unless you're in a weird nightmare where you're trapped inside a building that looks the same everywhere.
Or a really expensive building where they spent a lot of time and money to make everything look the same.
But just being like lived in and used will create variation within a building. Like, the wall got scuffed here from someone moving something, or, the paint didn't quite hold in this section of wall because it's near a wet part, things like that. So you wouldn't expect that in a fantasy building either, unless it was a weird old wizard tower that was magically done that way. And as such, you create the uniformity and then you kind of mess it up. It's sort of the ultimate thrust of set Dungeons and Dragons set pieces like this. And what I'm creating is the uniformity right now, and what my dad is doing is messing it up.
Mm-hmm. By putting in darker colored blocks
In random spots.
Yeah.
Random-ish spots.
Haphazardly spotted.
Inconsistent spots.
Yeah, we actually discovered doing that with our very first set, which was the red one. And it was all done in the scarlet red, and that was, oh, those are pretty bright. Let's throw some black wash on it, and that made it look really good.
This piece is slightly loose as well. It's not as loose as the others, but this is another candidate for some repair work.
Mm-hmm.
Since I already started painting it, like the other one, I will finish it, and then we will set it aside. And we'll just carefully break off the piece that is loose and reglue it. Is effectively what we're doing.
Yeah, so when we painted those first red ones, it was this nice uniform red color, and I think it was Alexis that said, well, what would happen if we painted some of them a different red? So we got a brighter red, which was really quite bright.
Yeah, that's the flat red.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how this is going to look, but once we put the wash on it really ended up looking pretty nice.
Yeah.
And the variation helped a lot in terms of making it look realistic, or at least interesting.
Setting that one aside on account of its looseness, and I'm just gonna stand up for a second. Give my back and everything a short break, but I'll keep going with the paint.
Yeah, is that new shorter stool working?
Yes, it's much more comfortable than what I had been using. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't check in with your body while you're working on things and periodically move and stretch. It's always good to keep yourself from getting sore or, in the long term, actively hurting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Getting cramped up or just having your muscles tighten up so much you can't stand up straight.
or causing like long-term damage to your body just from constantly being hunched over. Last one.
Wow. Congratulations.
So this will give us a little bit of a paint accounting in a minute here. Our music stopped again. I wonder what's up with that.
Mm. Doesn't that loop back around? Does it?
Maybe the settings got messed up. I'll give it a check once I am through with all of this last piece. Alright, so counting the two slightly broken pieces, there have been 5, 10, 15, 20, 43 wall sections painted just now. So, I'd say that used 2/3 of the bottle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, maybe even 3/4.
About, we'll say 3/4 of the bottle. So you can do, let's say, 45 and 3/4, right?
Mm-hmm.
With a full bottle, you could probably do what?
60.
60 general tiles of the bottle size we are using here. So that's a nice little number to keep in the back of our heads going forward when we're looking at counting out how many things to paint. I'm going to, for the moment, close this bottle. And the pieces over here should all be dry. It's been a while. So this is the sort of groundwork I've been putting in. Just some simple gray that will be touched up and made nicer over time. I'm going to take these pieces that are dry and move them out of the way in order to make room for floor tiles. it looks like you have been getting a good amount of the darker block.
Yeah. Moving along.
Little stacks of 5. And then these will get the same treatment that my dad here has been giving all the others, which is a selection of random darker bricks painted onto them. And these are some of the more interesting pieces. We have like arrow slits. You know, if you have like a proper fortress, something like that. And there's also windows like that. Just fun little neat additions. Big curved corners. Things like that. And these are all magnetized, so they lock themselves together lightly. So you can configure them all sorts of ways. These pieces are going to be on the wetter side. Still probably want some time to dry. So I'm going to slide them down here into the middle. And next, floor tiles.
Oh, there's a lot of those.
There are a couple floor tiles. Luckily, these are fairly simple to paint. They are just the floor. So, the downside of them is they can't stack on top of each other to dry. So,
they will take up a fair amount of space.
They're going to take up a bit of space. But it's 4:40, so I'm going to see how many of these I can get through in the next 20 minutes or so. I'm going to get a new glove. I had taken off that glove to not get paint everywhere because there was a fair amount on it. And that's one of the nice things is if you get paint all over your hand, you have to go wash it off immediately. Can't work on anything else. If you get glue on a glove or paint on a glove, you just take the glove off. These are the two pieces that need re-gluing up here. So, I'm going to keep going with this brush. I give it a little wash to clean out and see how much of this jar I can get through. Now, the nice thing about these floors is all it takes is a nice quick coat on here and then a check on all the sides and I'm done. These dungeon center tiles will not only take a lot less paint to produce, but also be quicker. So, a lot better than these walls that I've been painting. And since we're not putting darker gray into the floor, these will also be ready to go for the wash and finishing right away, which is nice. So, still wet, but a nice, just simple gray floor tile. And that will sit in like that. And I have a huge pile of them to do, so
this whole thing will be covered in floor tiles.
I'll probably have to stop and clean out floor tiles before I can finish everything. I'm expecting them to take up more room to dry than I have here. But yeah, so these are our Dungeons and Dragons floor tiles that we're painting. If anyone has any questions about what we're doing, feel free to ask. But otherwise, I am going to fix the music because it stopped with my non-gloved paint-free hand. I think all that happened is that should fix it. Alright, much better. So, I like doing these last just because it's kind of a break from all of the big curved walls and windows and things like that. It's easy, it's quick. It's sort of like going downhill, I guess.
Yeah, you see the results quickly. Good way to finish.
Yeah.
Like you said, when you're starting to get kind of tired and less focused.
And one thing I'm trying to do actually is not make a consistent thickness of paint across these. Because, like I said earlier, because I have a black primer on the piece, and these are supposed to be stone. Stone isn't one consistent color, generally speaking, and so these shouldn't be either. So you end up having that inconsistency sort of built in if you let some of the paint be a little thinner in some areas and a little thicker in some areas. It'll create a darker gray where it's thinner because there's black underneath, and that will be something that you can enhance further with a wash down the line. I also like to later with the wash put in like splotches randomly throughout them, just where there's like discolorations from anything. You can create a little more visual interest in a large gray floor without being eye-catching. Like, you probably wouldn't, unless you're going for a very specific look, you probably wouldn't put a blood splatter on the floor. Though if you're playing a game where you're like, sometimes I need a battlefield, you could make a couple tiles like this, central floor tiles, put some blood splatter on them, and then when needed, you pull those tiles out and fit them in with the rest of the pieces. So that's one of the nice things about these sort of modular dungeon tile sets, is that if you want to have like a spell circle painted on one or something like that, which might be pretty cool to do, you can use just a single one of these, get it painted on, and you pretty much only have you haven't done it to a huge set. You've just done it to one piece, so that you can swap in when you want it. I am sort of tempted to put a spell circle on one of these central floor tiles.
Yeah, or like you said, a blood stain.
Yeah, or a big blood stain. Maybe you want to add that effect of like this is a castle under siege or something. And you can mix in those bloodstain pieces. It's one of the great things about doing sets like this is you can always custom make them to what you're trying to do, that custom building that you can't necessarily get from just buying a pre-made one. You could always modify a pre-made one, for sure.
But after you spent a bajillion dollars on it,
you might not want to.
Not want to.
Whereas this definitely, making your own like this definitely has an upfront cost, because you need a 3D printer. Generally, pretty much, is the big cost. But I'd say, you know, if we were buying all of the pieces that we've printed and painted, we've paid for our 3D printers 10 times over. Just how much you can produce with them. But it takes a little technical know-how to figure out how to do all of that. And that's A-okay. If you don't have the time, money, or energy, I played on a basically like a dry erase board for a decade.
Long time.
You know, this is sort of a thing that we couldn't really get ourselves to do. Basically, my wife wanted to get into 3D printing as a hobby. So we got a printer, and then we were like, hey, we have a printer. Why don't we
print things?
Why don't we make D&D things? And it sort of ran from there.
Now we're painting
hundreds of
things gray.
Dungeon tiles gray. The slippery slope, I think. Sometimes I do find for the simplicity of a whiteboard and a dry erase board. When you're
I know, right?
When you're on your 50th tile that you're painting. But they just, I don't know, they just feel nice when you're playing with them. And that's really
good.
what it
They look really good on
to.
camera. Some of the battles have looked really nice.
Yeah.
And we have made use of the crates and barrels.
Yeah, I found that the more generic a setting piece, like a chest or a crate
Or a table.
or a table, those are the things that get used the most because they fit into a castle just as much as a tavern, just as much as a house. So,
and when you're done, you can say, I searched through all the crates and barrels.
Whereas we also printed and painted some giant rats that we've used once.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's fun to have the giant rats, and they look cool when you're fighting them for sure.
Mm-hmm. But you hardly, you don't run into giant rats very often. But
there's also something to be said about, if you want to just paint a model for the fun of painting a model, this isn't going to be the most fun compared to a giant rat or a dragon. There's not a ton of variation. There's not a ton of relatively a lot of sort of artistic expression that comes from painting 1,000 square feet of floor tiles. But
until you put the splotches in.
Well,
yeah, then it's very artistic.
The splotches, the Rorschach splotches on your floor tiles. I don't know. I feel like maybe there's enough here that I can do 1 or 2 with some blood splatters or a magic circle. Things like that one.
Well, it's not like you can't make more, too.
Oh, I know. We can always print out and do a couple more. I just feel like they would be kind of fun and neat to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
Mostly getting all of these edges that are the sort of slowest part of all of these dungeon tiles. It's a big dungeon floor I'm making here. It's a little reminiscent of the sewer set we built with all the gray. Although that we covered with a lot of green wash to create sort of a slimy algae look.
Yeah, that worked really well on the gray. I'm still impressed at how well the green wash came across.
And there's also not a huge pile of what are they called? Sluiceways? Running full of grime and grunge. But I think that this set will probably be one of the most used sets of all the ones we make. Although we use the town one quite a bit. The plaster walls.
Yeah, the wood framed with plaster.
The sort of wood frame plaster wall set. I have a piece just floating here for whatever reason. I might have had to repair it or something. Very nice and convenient to grab. And the nice thing is that all of these set pieces that we're making, they're all on the same grid system because it's D&D, and they're all on the same magnet system that we built into them, put into them. So you can, there's actually like road tiles and stuff, cobblestone roads that we might make soon. And you can use those plaster ones to like put actual buildings along a roadside and have it all connect together in one large piece. Or you could have like a stone building like this connected to a wooden plaster building. Hi. Here, this is our 3D printer in Dungeon Master.
Well, I'm not the 3D printer. That's the 3D printer.
Thank you.
How's it going along?
Good. I did 43 walls.
It's like you threw basically the whole first bottle.
Yeah, one bottle, we're guessing, based on what we're seeing, one bottle of paint will base coat about 60 pieces.
Of those, yeah.
Yeah.
60 general wall tile.
Okay.
Which is a good number to sort of have a estimation.
Now, can these... I know we were looking into it. Can these paints just be put right into an airbrush?
When the bottles first open.
When the bottles first open?
Well, like this one, this is getting really gummy.
Because it's been air exposed.
Yeah, and it's
Quite a
like
bit.
3/4 of the way down. It's fine for brushing yet, although it's getting a little...
But if it's fresh,
Okay.
Yeah. I would say like this one, before I cap it up, I'm going to put a little water and a little alcohol, a little bit of each in it, so that the next time it's shaken up, it thins it out. But,
Gotcha.
But, for airbrushing, if it's too thick, it's really, you just use a little alcohol.
Yeah. All airbrushing is ultimately is you have a little bottle with a tube, a air compressor, and it shoots air through a pen or a brush, basically. Pulls up the paint into it, the airstream, and shoots a little spray of compressed air and paint. You can use it to get a very even coat on things with no brush lines, things like that. I was thinking of doing a few floors here with some like blood splatters on one or two.
Yeah.
Just for fun. Maybe paint a spell circle on one.
There are actually floor tiles that have Celtic knots, spell circles, and other things like that that I haven't printed. So if you're interested in doing some of those,
That might be fun.
I have the prints for those. Well, I have the models for those. I haven't sliced them, and we can get them on the cards and print them up. I think. I thought we had a couple extra bases.
That might be fun to do. We should also do a few inside corners.
Yeah, this particular design didn't have a lot of inside corners.
Yeah, but it's always good to have a couple.
There's a few. I think there's 4 altogether.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing any.
Oh wait, no. Nope, they're all actually done in doorway pieces. There are no inside corners.
Yeah, the double. So maybe like 4 to 6 inside corners would be good.
Yeah, I could make a couple more of those.
And then, I don't know, doing a spell circle or something like that might be fun.
Yeah, we're actually doing... there's been a lot of updates to these sets, so I'm reslicing all of the old pieces, because some of them I cut about a year and a half ago. So there's been quite a few updates to them that have improved the model pieces, the base, and everything, so that's part of my project. I'll put that on the list.
Just on the floors with the base coat. And then we're done with base coating.
Wow.
Although it is 5 o'clock, so when I finish this little stack, we might wrap up here. I think.
Yeah, I've got 3 left, so I'm going to just finish these.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the doors. You guys made they're really good.
Yeah,
You
the
like,
doors are nice, yeah.
You like the doors?
Yeah.
I tried to give some nice splotchiness to the floors in some areas. So it looks like something might have fallen and dried in a couple of them. So.
And looks like Dad is doing the individual brick touches.
Yes.
I'm doing the haphazard
Darker bricks.
highlight.
I had done the corners previously.
The highlights are looking great.
Yeah. Yeah, when we first did that on the red ones, I was saying earlier that it was like, oh, these look all uniform and everything. That's nice. We decided, well, let's see what would happen if we made some of them a different color red. And even though it was really bright red once the wash came through, it turned out really interesting.
This set is going to be
Massive.
Large.
It's a very large set. Don't worry, I will be using this quite a bit.
I kind of figured we would be using this. I was saying that when I was guessing which piece I was going to have my character die on.
I'm guessing which piece your character was going to die on.
Yeah, in combat. And I was saying once we if one of us dies in it, we should pull out that piece that they died on as a memorial.
Well, if your characters ever die on any of our pieces, we'll make a little memorial piece.
Out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Alright, so this brush is well used, and water's not going to cut it for cleaning it, so...
Seems like an alcohol brush.
Yes. While you're using that, I'm going to grab the alcohol to clean the brush more properly.
No, don't use that.
Yeah,
That's rusted.
yeah, I was looking for the bottle. There we go. Thank you.
So after you put it in the cup, before you put your brush in,
Mm-hmm.
take the eyedropper and fill it like halfway up with the alcohol. Use that to thin the paint.
That's quite a bit. Halfway out.
Yeah, I won't sit all put that way. There'll be enough.
Okay. So, a relatively clean bit of water. And I'm gonna just start getting the paint out of this brush. Cleaning your brushes is an important thing to using them for a long time. And while we're using a water-based paint, the solvents in this case, it's an alcohol. Just help pull it out a lot more quickly and a lot more effectively. And you can even use it to clean up on this upper part of the brush where sometimes you get little paint splatters. Give it one more quick little cleaning. Do you want to use this?
Yeah, I'll use that a little bit too. I'll use the water first.
And that does a really good job of just getting the brush nice and clean. And ready to use when you come back and paint the rest of the floor tiles. So, these are the last of our unpainted dungeon tiles right here, this big stack. And they all will look like this soon. And then those will get painted to look like this. In the end, these little dungeon pieces. Oh, that is the exciting goal
I'm
of
just
where we're going.
finishing up this last window,
Getting
getting the highlights on it. I've got the other side here.
okay. I'm gonna let these dry a little longer before I handle them. But we're pretty close. It looks like
Oh, now you can touch it.
I'm just gonna show. So we're building in these sort of darker stone bricks. which will just give a little variation to the final pieces. So when they're like this, you can do an okay looking dungeon piece. But if you add in just a little subtle variation like I did on this piece, those darker bricks will create you probably won't even like notice it when you're looking at them generally, but you'll subconsciously notice that variation a bit more. Anyway, we're all done for the day. We have a whole bunch of dungeon tiles, so thank you everyone for watching.
Yep, thanks for checking in.
We're gonna be back. Our next stream will be this Sunday, probably. We might do a video game stream tomorrow. I don't know, but our D&D show will be on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern, here on this channel. Our next painting stream will be Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, and we do that Tuesday and Friday. So you can check us out then as well if you're interested in seeing how all these are coming. And these are actually pretty dry already, which is nice.
Yep, almost done with the floors. You'll get to see.
Well, I got about a fifth of the way into the floors.
Yeah, you'll get to see somebody painting like 50 of these with random dark
bricks.
Yay.
And we'll probably re-glue these too.
That'll be exciting. Watching epoxy getting mixed.
Just because they're...
And everybody going, ugh, really?
It's glued, but it's like a baby tooth. You just wanna play with it. Alright, so thank you everyone. We will see you Sunday, hopefully. Bye.